And it was insane what they found within Roblox, just horrific content. And I'll let listeners go look for that. But know that if your kid is playing online on Roblox, which seems safe for kids, it's not. And your kid's going to get access to some pretty horrible stuff.
Just do something. Doing nothing is no longer an option. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Safety Net Podcast. Josh will be with us today, but I'm thrilled to be joined by someone who's made a huge impact in raising awareness about the pitfalls in our hyper-connected world. Our guest is Nikki Riesberg, the brilliant mind behind the Scrolling to Death podcast, who has dedicated her platform to exploring the dangers of digital addiction, the endless scrolling, and how we can break free from the cycle to live more intentional lives. Her insights are not only eye-opening, but also deeply practical. I'm really excited to dive into this conversation with her today and explore the intersections between digital addiction and cybersecurity, and how we can better protect ourselves and our families in this fast-paced digital age. Nikki, so glad to have you.
Thank you. I like how you described my podcast. I think I need to borrow that. That was great.
All right, so I guess let me just jump right in. And so the first question, I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory, but what does scrolling to death mean to you? How do you think it affects our digital lives today?
Yeah, so scrolling to death kind of means what it sounds like. There is a link between the amount of time our kids are scrolling, spending on smartphones and addictive social media sites, and the increase in suicide rates among young kids. I mean, the suicide is now the second leading cause of death for kids aged 10 to 14. And so those rates are spiking. Self-harm rates, hospitalization due to mental health issues in young kids. And so one great resource that influenced me is The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. He's got a great book that kind of shows clearly how these things have aligned. And so I wanted to, through storytelling and interviews with parents, elevate the human experience behind the harms of social media. And so that's what I'm doing with Scrolling to Death. And yeah, that's what it means to me, just what it sounds like. It's sometimes a harsh name to hear, but I think, I can really stand behind it every day when I hear more stories and research of the self-harm content and suicide content that platforms are serving to our kids.
Yeah. And I tell you, the name caught my attention when I saw it appear on my LinkedIn feed. It just was like, scrolling to death. What is this? And then to just start to pay attention to the things you were saying. So it's an incredible name, and it's so timely for what is happening in the world with regard to the safe tech movement and things like that. And so how do you manage a digital overload in your personal and your professional life? Because you're using tech, you have to be connected, you got to be able to do all this stuff. How do you manage that?
Mm-hmm. I try. No one's perfect. This is very demanding, being that I release 3 episodes a week on the podcast and do daily videos to Instagram and YouTube. And so it's a very demanding job. And my husband and I kind of made a deal that for this time, when he gets home, I need a little more time to do some work. And then in the morning, I wake up about an hour early, or earlier than my kids, to get at least an hour in the morning. And that's been helpful. But when it comes to like social media specifically, I do have accounts because getting the message out and promoting the podcast, but I try to create and not scroll. So I don't actually follow any personal friends or influencers, anything that, and maybe a normal person would. I only post, and then I review the comments and my notifications, but I don't spend any time scrolling through content and kind of becoming a victim of the algorithm. And that's been really helpful for managing my time on social media specifically.
Yeah, that was one of the biggest challenges I faced when I founded ArkCybr, was getting the message out. And how do I get back on platforms that I had been disconnected from for years? I'd been disconnected decades. So I had gotten on and then got a bunch of friends and sent all this information, and then was like, oh, I hate social media, and deleted my accounts. And then, then I found out like I can't reach people if we're not there. So I totally understand what you're saying. I actually even had somebody, a good friend, a pastor. So I have given him control, like parental controls over my phone. And I ask him, hey, block Facebook, block this, block that. And so every once in a while, I'll ask him to let me back on so I can just do some stuff.
Mm-hmm.
typically around the holidays or whatever.
Yeah,
But yeah, so
of
totally
course.
get that. Love that for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, how do you think the constant connectedness of modern life has changed the way we think about security and privacy?
I think all of our data and information is just part of the deal. I think that to use, and it is, I mean, to use any of the free platforms, we have to agree to terms of service that are hidden from us and not clearly written.
Hmm.
So we don't really know what we're giving away. And I think a stat I shared recently, we're sharing information not only about ourselves, but a lot about our children on these platforms. And there's something like by the time a child turns 13, there's 70 million data points that's been shared about them through your activity as the parent. And so that information is going to be used to manipulate them through algorithms and advertisements when they get online. And should we be so willy-nilly with giving that data up? I don't believe so. And I think we need to be paying more attention to what we're giving away because our data is super valuable. These companies are collecting it and then selling it to other companies, lots of other companies. And so they're profiting off of our personal information, way more information than we would even imagine is being taken from us. And so there's some work being done in this space, but I think that parents need to just be more careful about what they share. That's something parents can do in the home is, especially when it comes to your kids' information, just be really conservative about what you share about your children and know that that information is being shared with who knows what, who knows where.
Yeah, absolutely. I used to be a police officer in the Army,
Mm,
and when I saw the term Facebook as it was coming into the world, I was like, Facebook? You mean the thing that we go to find potential suspects? And they were like,
mm,
no. Well, in the digital world, essentially, the CIA used to have to torture people to get the kind of information people give away on
wow.
these platforms. And
Right.
really, they've created a digital Facebook of like, suspects, whatever. And there's the whole like side of the world that's like Facebook's all government and
Mm,
conspiracy side and whatever.
yeah.
But yeah, people are really free with the information that they share because they're like, well, I don't have anything to hide, or and it may not be necessarily about what you have to hide, but
Hmm.
what I, as a malicious actor, can use that information and pretend to be you, identity theft or whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, excellent.
Yeah.
All
The
right, so those were
identity.
just some general
Yeah.
questions. Yep, sorry, go ahead. Yeah, finish your
Yeah,
thought.
the identity theft and like that kind of thing is a real risk, and especially with kids' data because kids' data is super valuable. They can use it longer. Um,
Yeah, for
and
sure.
yeah, so there's that, and then there's also the piece about manipulating people through the algorithms and like are your thoughts and beliefs even your own anymore when you're spending that much time being manipulated by an algorithm? There can be an argument
Mm,
made, probably not. So
yeah, it's a much more subversive way to kind of do mind and thought control and
yeah.
really shape the. I hadn't considered that, but that's a fantastic point.
Hmm.
Uh, yeah, I knew this was going to be an amazing interview. All right, so those were just some general questions, and now I
Okay.
want to just kind of more specifically narrow the focus a little bit onto cybersecurity.
Hmm.
Um, so as it relates to this aspect, so what do you think is the most overlooked aspect of cybersecurity that individuals and even businesses, right? Small businesses have the same problems as families and individuals because they're resource constrained, they're budget constrained. Enterprises and industry, defense, all that, they have the budgets to keep cyber experts like us on staff. But families, small businesses, individuals, they don't have that. So what do you think, or what would you advise them to pay more attention to?
Yeah, it is super complicated to figure out how to lock down your household when your kids have access to devices. And there's different tools you can employ, but it's tough. It's tough. The social media platforms all have their own parental controls, which do a really horrible job, but you should definitely use them. And then parents also need to tack on third party parental controls. So whether that's Bark Technologies, Game Safe AI has a really good one for gaming platforms. You need that as well. Also, you need to, through your internet provider, there's some blocking systems and time limits and things you can set there. You can turn off your internet entirely after a certain time of night. So It's like sort of like a full-time job trying to figure out how to control and keep your kids safe from threats on their devices, which is why I generally say just delay as long as possible,
Mm.
with conversations as to why you're delaying. Because once you introduce devices, it's going to be a lot of work to try to keep them safe, and it's sort of impossible.
So you literally are making the case for why ArkCybr exists. And
Yeah.
when I speak at trade shows or when I'm just doing like a one-on-one, I ask the parent, do you remember when you taught your child how to ride a bike? And they're like, yeah, of course. And I said, the first thing you did, right? You went out and you got them the keys to a brand new Harley and you said, YOLO, I trust you, make good decisions. And
Yeah.
they're like,
Yeah.
what? No. And I'm like, well, that's what you're
Yeah.
doing with technology. Like you're literally handing them the keys to a Harley Davidson, and you should be walking alongside them. And just like you did with a bike, you put them on the age appropriate technology. You gave them the safety measures, the helmets and elbow pads that they needed. And then when you were ready, you let one hand go and you put the other hand, maybe to steady them and gave them a little shove, but you still ran alongside them until they proved they were able to handle that level of technology. And then the training wheels came off the bike. You
Hmm.
trusted them a little bit more. But
Yeah.
yeah, with
That's a
that,
great analogy.
yeah. Did you have
Yeah.
thoughts on that? Yeah.
I mean, agree. And a lot of people make the comparison to driving a car, right? They have to take all this training, and then you have to buy
Mm-hmm.
insurance, and then they have to get a license, and they have to renew their insurance based on if they're doing a good job driving. And so,
Mm-hmm.
yes, but I love the bike analogy too. I mean, the fact that we can just give our kids access to technology without any required training, and they have access
Yeah.
to the whole world, and the whole world has access to them, is not the right way to go.
Yeah. Just the dangers. And because, I think I use that analogy because um, we hand technology to children as young as 6 and 7, and that's roughly five, 4 or 5, maybe the age when the kids start to learn to ride bikes.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great.
Um,
Yeah. I love
and
it.
thank you. So the other part is, one of the biggest things I hear, and you touched on it, is it becomes a full-time job. And so the initial setup, the initial configuration, the initial just creation of all these things can be so overwhelming. The tech companies aren't necessarily interested in helping the family. The tech companies aren't necessarily interested in you getting it right and setting it up properly. And
Right.
so that's exactly what ArkCybr does. That's our mission, is to, if we have to, and if I have to, I will sit one-on-one with a family to help them design their solution properly, because their use
Hmm.
case doesn't match your use case and it doesn't match mine. So I will help them design it. Now that's not scalable. And so I'm actually
Hmm.
in the process of creating a way where this whole, thing becomes, but anyway, we'll talk about that when I'm on your show.
Amazing.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Amazing.
All right. So the scrolling to death part, the reality, all this, you said you had social media. Have you ever felt the addiction to your devices or the social media, and what did you do to overcome?
Yeah. I mean, I think we all feel it every day. I think, when you're just sitting down and your arm starts to reach for your device, or you walk in another room and you realize you grabbed your device and you didn't even remember doing that. I think those are all, you know, symptoms of the fact that you are really attached to this thing that is not you, and it's not attached to you. It's not a part of you. And so it's hard. It's hard because, I'll watch a movie with my kids at the end of the day, and I have to fight the urge to have my phone in my hand while I'm watching the movie. And
Mm,
my husband and I have made a deal that when the kids are home, we try to leave our phones up in our bedrooms. So it's like super far away from us. And, drawbacks to that, no one can get a hold of me. And we're thinking about even just getting a landline so that we can be reachable,
yeah.
without having the addictive device on our person. But I think that separating yourself physically is a really good idea. I think not making it so easy to use. So I don't have like a case on my phone so that it's like kind of uncomfortable to use. I don't have a pop socket on the back so that I can just hold it for
Yeah.
as long as I want. Just making little adjustments. Not having an Apple Watch, sorry, but I used it for a couple of years and I was like, why do I need to be this reachable? This is crazy. It's like just making it easier to disconnect and more uncomfortable to use the technology, I think is some good ways to try to shift away from the addictiveness of the device, and shows a good example for your kids too.
Yeah. That's actually a super practical thing to do to not have a case on it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when I think about, so I do like red team exercises, and sometimes, if you go too high tech, the blue team will go low tech, and then, you're kind of fighting that battle.
Mm-hmm.
But that is a very budget friendly, super
Mm-hmm.
easy thing to do to just make the tech uncomfortable. And
Yeah.
if you talk to Apple designers and Pixel designers and any phone designer, they want it sleek, they want it smooth, they want that experience that you just don't want to put this thing down. You remember carrying those big, ugly, or if you ever had one of those big brick phones or the Nokia, you know,
Uh, I mean, I think I came in
iPhone.
at like the Razor time frame, so I
Okay,
didn't I
so
didn't have a
yeah,
big brick phone, but I had yeah, it was sleek. It was already sleek.
yeah, yeah. So they had already started like kind of improving the look and feel and the way it just
Yeah.
slipped into your pocket and
Yep.
all of that. And so yeah, I think there's definitely something to the physical connected experience that they want,
Mhm.
and that's just a neat way to kind of cut that off. That's pretty practical. That's
Yeah,
pretty amazing.
thanks. Thank you.
So I was going to ask you. So that's a fantastic tip. And what other advice would you give to someone looking to reduce their screen time without the feeling of being disconnected?
Yeah. I mean, it's that you just have to spend time without your phone, right? I mean, it sounds so basic, but if
Yeah.
you like, sometimes when I go walk to get the kids from school, just don't bring my phone. That's okay if I'm away from my phone for 20 minutes. So separating your life from the device. So if I park in front of the coffee shop, I don't need my phone to walk into the coffee shop, get a coffee, walk out to my car. So just leaving it somewhere else for small bits of time, and you'll like breathe back. Like I just am like free. You feel good. It feels good. I mean, it feels uncomfortable because you're so used to it, but it feels good. And then again, with when you're at home, just leaving it in another room. If you have kids that are old enough to have devices, a lot of families try to have a docking station or some kind of box or garage, like phone garage for their phones, where everybody
Yeah.
leaves it in one spot, so you're not carrying it around the house with you. People use grayscale, so maybe there's a setting on the phone where you can set it to grayscale, so it just is less exciting. It's kind of
Mm.
boring to look at it. Um, Setting time limits, moving your apps around so they're harder to find, even deleting apps off your phone for a little while, to give yourself a break. So those are all ways you can try to trick yourself into using your phone less, I guess.
All right. So you had touched on the grayscale, just some incredible, practical, easy ways to
Mhm.
make the device less exciting. And that's just a fantastic tip. I don't even know. I hadn't even thought of that, but that's just like it's so simple. And you kind of said
Mhm.
before, it's like just setting your device down. That's so practical. We
Thank
don't
you.
have TVs in our bedrooms.
Yeah,
We do
we don't either.
allow our same, yeah.
Mhm.
We do allow our youngest son now to have his phone and tablet with him, but definitely doesn't go anywhere else, other areas of the house, bathrooms or
Mhm.
anything like that.
Yeah,
Um,
great. Perfect.
but yeah. So I have another child that had some issues with the restrictions, and he ended up, instead of just embracing the restrictions, he actually went out and had to get another device because he wanted to find a way around the restrictions and he couldn't. And so another device that he bought on his own became his way. And I was like, son, that's not a filter problem or a restriction problem. That's a heart problem. Like you're
Mhm.
chasing this stuff, and I can't solve that for you. Like this is
Yeah.
going to destroy you. And ultimately, he's had some struggles. He's now actually um, kind of following in my footsteps, going through the program type
Mhm.
uh, rehab. He's with some great guys down in just outside of the place I went to back in 2001,
Cool.
and so
Yeah.
it's really neat to see him, yeah, kind of
Yeah, it might be
breaking away
helpful
from
for
this.
him. It might be helpful for him to listen to some of the stories of harm from my podcast. A lot of parents will say when their kids are old enough, like
Yeah,
hearing the stories of harm, whatever the online harm topic may be,
yeah,
is helpful for kids. They don't want to hear it from their parents.
yeah. Yeah, he's 21 now. Matter of fact, just
Hmm.
turned, and so he's still a young
Yeah,
man,
yeah,
but his he was just making horrible choice after horrible choice. But he's now got his feet firmly planted beneath him, and he's working his way
good.
through it. It did start with his girlfriend, So I'm like, oh, thank God that she like wanted to get herself together, and
Hmm.
like he kind of followed her to. She wants to be right and clean, and he wants to be right and clean. So I'll take it.
Great. Oh, that's so
Yeah.
cool.
So
Yeah.
all right. So some of these questions, I mean, you kind of just nailed pretty much all. Okay, here's a good one. Really, we kind of touched on it in the beginning when you were sharing about yourself and about the scrolling to death. But if you could kind of talk more about the deeper motivation, what really caused you to get into this field? What brought you here?
Yeah. So I had a social media management company for a little over 10 years. So I was on the other side of this whole thing and really realized over time, at first it wasn't so manipulative and harmful. And then over time it did become more harmful. And I realized how manipulative social media was to users, specifically child users.
Hmm.
But it was in 2020 I watched The Social Dilemma and was really affected by that during that time. Obviously, 2020,
Hmm.
everything was going crazy. And so I deleted all social media at that time and felt really great. I felt like my whole life was better. My relationships with people were actually better because we were connecting one on one rather than online on social media. And so I started to dig into social media use and how it was affecting people and kids. And I found the stories of harm, and I found the suicide rates, and we already touched on that. But one thing that really got me was learning about children who had lost their life because of something specifically that happened to them on social media, and social media having a huge role in their death. And I felt like parents need to hear these stories so that we can not have that happen to our
Hmm.
children. We can make different decisions in our home, or at least be aware and have conversations early with our kids about these harms. And so, yeah, that was the motivation in the beginning. And one of my first interviews was with Kristen Bride, who lost her son Carson to suicide after being severely cyberbullied through Snapchat. But Snapchat had allowed a third party app, an anonymous app onto it, which allowed him to be just viciously cyberbullied, and he didn't know who was doing it. And it got so bad that he took his life. And so that, in one of my first episodes, I mentioned Kristen, and then I got to interview her pretty early on. And now we've met in person several times. And I mean, it's something that I think a lot of parents don't think could happen to their kid. But after talking to so many parents who've lost their child, it absolutely could happen to anyone's child. My last thought was just about what I've learned from these families who have suffered harm from social media is that it can happen to anybody. And a lot of parents will say, "Not my kid. That could never happen to my
Hmm.
kid." But we can't think that
Yeah.
way. We have to be proactive with our conversations and with our monitoring of their activities so that we can protect them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think a lot of people want to know like when their child should get access to certain things. So when it comes to social media, just don't give it to them as long as possible. I would say a lot of people say wait until 16, which I think is a reasonable time frame. My kids won't get access to social media at all until they are an adult, unless it is made safer through legislation, which isn't looking good right now, but who knows. Um, and then there's been a lot of news about the gaming platforms lately. So I'll touch briefly on there was a new report about Roblox by Hindenburg Research, which you can link to that report.
Yeah.
And it was insane what they found within Roblox, just horrific content. And all listeners go look for that. But just know that if your kid is playing online on Roblox, which seems safe for kids, it's not. And your kid's going to get access to some pretty horrible stuff. And so either just choose not to use games like Roblox, even Minecraft and Fortnite, unfortunately, have harmful content. So we have to either choose not to use those platforms or add a third party monitoring platform to the top of it, and also have conversations about what your child is to do if they are asked for a nude image or shown something horrible on those platforms. So I just want parents to remember that gaming platforms, even though they seem safe for kids, are not, unfortunately.
And that's terrible. I was actually looking at
Yeah.
a game. One of those ads pop up, and it looks intriguing. It looks interesting, and so I'm looking at this game, and I see in it has a chat capability, and in that chat capability, it just has chat. But in there, you don't know the ages or the backgrounds of any of these
Hmm.
people, but here they are, they're just able to communicate.
Yeah.
And so, that what started off probably
Yep.
as a neat, cool thing has just turned into something horrible.
Hmm.
And that's the problem with that human nature, that kind of like desire to just troll and utterly corrupt everything for no real good reason, when things
Yeah.
could be good. I
Totally.
mean, this is kind of this, like, you're in California, I'm on the East Coast here. Like, this is insane. This is the kind of things that technology
Hmm.
enables, all the good. But
Yeah.
there's just so many things that they just use for bad and destroy. Preaching to the choir, I imagine.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, it's real. We can't think that's not going to happen to our kid. So
Yeah,
you're right.
that's a real shocking part. Is it's more of a matter of when and how bad the exposure, not if they're going to get it.
Yes.
And
Right.
it used to, this, you kind of touched on this earlier. This used to be, oh, the boys, it's normal for them to this and that, but now there's girls that are making decisions that are going to impact them for the rest of their lives. Yeah.
So yeah, no, and those sextortions, what you're talking about there, and parents should look up that issue because it's targeting a lot of kids, especially teen boys. But girls are being asked to ask for nude imagery all the time on social media and add
Mm.
money for nude imagery, or just thinking that it's safe because on Snapchat it disappears in quotes, and really it doesn't because the kid can screenshot it or take a picture of it with another device. But there's also the issue with generative AI and that kids' photos are being taken and made to look naked, realistically naked, when they weren't naked. And that's being shared around. So it's a scary place right now online.
Yeah, I saw. I think it was your post today that there was an AI chat bot that was made to look underage. Was that yours? That may have been Chris over at Protect Young Eyes. But yeah,
It
that
might have been
generative
Chris.
AI,
Hmm.
it's just
Yeah.
unbelievable.
Scary.
You'd said
Yeah.
something, the photos and all that disappearing, and the girls being willing. I maybe it was your show too that I heard this, but it starts off with hand and feet pics, innocuous, and as they do these hand and
Mm-hmm.
feet pics, the scammer, the scumbag, pays. And so this kind of shows, oh, look, I gave him
Hmm.
hand and feet, and he actually paid me the $100 or whatever the money, the monetary value associated with it.
Yeah.
And so they get a comfort with that, and they're able to. And I don't remember if it was your show where I saw this broken. This is how it started, and a girl, I think it was a girl,
Mm.
talking about how she started with her feet and got comfortable because the person kept paying, and then when they moved into the more I don't even want to use the word, but the more inappropriate photos,
Right.
they were willing to do it because they had paid before, and they offered them larger sums of money.
Yeah.
So
And that's, I mean, that's somebody's daughter just like making a
yeah,
mistake. And that could be our kid, it's just
exactly.
so
Yeah,
dangerous.
yeah. The internet, didn't exist when I was growing up, for sure, or at least in the form that it is in
Hmm.
now. And actually, in one of my
Hmm.
talks, one of the first talks I did, I don't know if you know this, but there was a study done, and I believe the university was Indiana University, where I gathered the source material from this. But pornography funded and grew the internet to what we have today. And so they
Hmm.
were looking for faster downloads, higher resolution video. And so they just kept pouring money into the development of what we have. And so a lot of the
Hmm.
enhancements and a lot of the great things that we have are because of the
Hmm.
pornography industry. And so they have a stake.
Yeah.
Yeah, are you familiar with that study?
Oh, but I'm not surprised. And I mean, social media is basically porn now, anyways. There's sexual content being
Yeah,
targeted to kids, and a lot of it parents don't realize it because parent accounts, adult accounts aren't going to be as harmful because we're adults and we have developed brains and we're not as susceptible to that type of content. But teens are getting tons of nude imagery or being asked to move to different platforms where there
yeah,
are less restrictions.
yeah.
So, yeah, that doesn't
That's a
surprise me.
great point. That should be at the top of every parent's kind of teaching, you know, red
Yeah.
flags. If you ever get asked to move from here to somewhere else, know that this is not going to
Yep.
end well. Yeah, that's a
Yep.
great point.
Big one. Yeah, that's a big one.
Especially with the moves that Instagram and some of the other platforms are making in light of the pressure and the COSA bill that's hopefully going to pass. They're posturing, of course. In last year's
Yes.
episodes of the Safety Net podcast, I talked about them. Basically, talked about the dopamine effects of screen time, and so everybody is recognizing the intentional addict building nature of these technologies, and people are, aware, the manufacturers especially are aware, and if they're not careful, can open themselves up to litigation for specifically creating an addiction response. Their goal is to keep you staring at that device, and that to me is harmful intent. They want you staring at their device, using their device constantly without really any breaks. This is kind of wild because none of this was even happening at that point. There were still conversations going on, but it wasn't as ongoing. And I said that this seems intentional, and it seems like just like putting on my old military police officer hat. This would be intent. Like the intent is to harm. The intent is to get them addicted. The intent is to get them exposed. And I was like,
Yes.
just as a reasonable person looking at this, would you agree? Like harmful intent?
Yes, the intent is to harm. The intent is to addict. Meta has internal studies showing teenage brains and pointing to different areas of the brain with a list of opportunities on how to get them to be more habitual users. That's trying to get teenagers addicted to your platform. And they also know that these companies know that the more time the kids spend online and on their platform, the less time they're spending doing things like eating and sleeping and interacting with other humans. And so you have TikTok saying like, well, shouldn't we be worried about other opportunities like eating and sleeping and moving around?
Yeah.
But not really. That's not good for their business growth. They need kids on there as long as possible. And so, yes, completely agree. These companies are making design choices specifically to addict children, and that needs to be stopped. We are, companies, organizations, everybody's trying to get legislation passed to force the companies to be safer for kids. And so far, they have been unsuccessful due to the millions and millions of dollars that the tech companies spend lobbying against these bills.
Yeah. And that's why ArkCybr has the Ark Builder movement. We're not waiting for technology companies to get their stuff together. We're just gonna rise above it. We're gonna basically prevent anyone that wants to from just even getting and consuming their content. And so there's some pretty neat things that we're gonna do with that. And once a third, 2/3 of their consumers vanish from the internet from them, they're gonna be scratching their heads like, where'd everybody go? So that's a pretty big deal. Yeah. And I can't wait to share it with the world. So it's still happening. Some nuance to it, of course.
Yeah.
But it's not too much unlike designing, a network for the federal government or the federal space.
It's so exciting.
All right. Any questions? Anything else?
No, I think we covered a lot. Those were some great questions. And then I'm available at scrollingtodeath.com with a number 2, and then at Scrolling to Death on Instagram or YouTube. And then I'm on LinkedIn under my name. So people can connect there too.
I'll have those links available for you. Nikki,
thank you.
This was even better than I had hoped and imagined. Thank you so much for your time and for being on the show. And I wish you continued success in just leading this fight and doing all the great work that you're doing. And it's great to just have more and more people waking up and realizing that there's a lot of bad things happening. So.
Sean, thank you for what you're doing, and keep me posted on how your product evolves. And I would love to support you moving forward as well. So again, thank you for having me.
Just do something. Doing nothing is no longer an option.